Hello guys and gals, welcome back to another episode of Creepypastas. Yes, before we return to the world of gaming creepypastas, and return we will to some shitpastas. But this time we're going to do November 2013's creepypasta of the month, called Revolution. So with that being said, let's dive right into this creepypasta. Now before we begin, the story actually takes place in the perspective of two narrators, one for the body of the story and one for the conclusion. So we're just going to start with the first part of the story right now. Our world wasn't always like this. My grandparents have told me stories about days of freedom and independence, an age where everyone had something special about them and we were able to share that unique something with the rest of the world. There were musicians, artists, and writers creating incredible pieces of art, music, and literature. There were magicians, jugglers, and actors, willing to perform for large crowds of people. Everyone was so happy and carefree, loving life and doing what they could to savor the good times. However, that all changed when a deranged doctor showed up out of nowhere with a sense of devices to eliminate all that. He used the devices to destroy the independence of our people and mutate the animals, all while leaving the cities in ruin. The once beautiful landscape of our planet had been reduced to a wasteland, leaving behind nothing but soil with barely enough nutrients to grow fruit trees and crops. The once diverse culture of people had been replaced by people that wear the same clothes and eat the same things day in and day out. Anyone who doesn't live by this lifestyle is frowned upon and punished by our dictator, the doctor. My grandparents were the only ones with knowledge of the days before the doctor. They had to be kept in hiding so they couldn't be executed. The doctor didn't want anyone to know the truth of the world's past and how he rose to power, so he began a secret worldwide campaign to get rid of all those who had memories of that age. To escape the clutches of the doctors, my parents began to live with us in what was our basement, where they found salvation. I would go down there every day to visit them and give them their meals. We would talk about the age of independence, and before I went back upstairs, they'd always tell me the same thing. You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you. Those words have been ringing in my head since they passed away. It's been 5 years since they died, and I've been wondering what great things I'd be doing. I wasn't sure until that fateful day. I was walking in the market getting some fruit for my parents when I heard an uproar happening on the south side of the square. I rushed over to where the commotion was, pushing my way through the crowd of people. Once I made it to the front of the crowd, I saw two young men having rope tied around their necks. People seemed to approve of the hanging of these people, throwing mud at them and calling them horrible names like treacherous swine. That's when I got a good look at them. The two men being hung were wearing tie-dye suits. They must have been protesting against the doctor by going out in public dressed in bright rainbow-stained suits. The crowd was hushed as the executioner walked towards the lever on the right-hand side of the platform, wrapping his hand around. He paused for a few seconds as one of the protesters began to yell at him. "You may take our lives, but you'll never take our independence, you bet." He never got to finish that sentence. As the executioner pulled the lever and the two protesters dropped below the platform, you could hear their necks snap as their bodies fell. They just hung there afterwards, cold and lifeless. The crowd appalled and cheered as the protesters were sent to their deaths. A few minutes passed and the commotion died down. I stood there, staring at the protesters. My grandparents' words repeated in my head. You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you. I knew what I had to do. I had to rebel against the doctor and start a revolution. I stayed up late that night planning my scheme. I needed to know how to start it, how to get everyone's attention, had a few ideas in my head going on. Didn't choose which one to use. I'd have to give it more thought during the day before I make my decision. All I could do was lay on my tattered bed, wide awake, hoping to fall asleep soon. The next day, my parents brought me to a restaurant in the square for lunch. It had recently opened and was very popular for some reason. Usually restaurants aren't allowed to be built unless approved by the doctor himself, and it rarely happens, so the food there must have been amazing to get past him. It even had an all-day breakfast, something, my father loved. I think the main reason it got approved and my parents wanted to eat there was because the restaurant served meat. The animals mutated because of the doctor's devices and weren't allowed to be eaten as it could kill anyone who ate their flesh. However, this restaurant found a way to cleanse the meat of the harsh chemicals in order to make them edible. We sat down at our table and began to look through the menu. After a few minutes, the waiter came to take our orders. I ordered the traditional breakfast, weary of what it would taste like, and from what I saw, everyone seemed to love it, so I thought I'd order it. 25 minutes passed and we finally got our food. All three of us ordered the same thing, the traditional breakfast. I looked down at my plate and what I saw didn't help my appetite. The meat, along with the hen buds, was discolored. having what appeared to be a light greenish hue to them. The bread was normal, but the rest looked distasteful. My parents began to eat right away and looked like they were enjoying it a lot. I picked up my knife and cut into the meat. It was tender and juicy, so I thought it wouldn't be as bad as I thought it would be. I put the piece I cut off into my mouth and began to chew. My eyes widened as I reached for the napkin to spit out the meat. It tasted horrid, like someone marinated it in sewage. I decided to eat the hen buds next. I began to eat a forkful of it and spat it out just as fast. It tasted worse than the meat. I grabbed the bread to cleanse my mouth of the disgusting taste. I ate as slowly as I could and pretended I was full when I ate both slices. That night, I was in my bed wide awake again. I had finally found a way to rebel against the doctor. I was going to share with the world my opinion of that fucking restaurant's food. I was going to wear eye-catching clothing under my gray overcoat as I make my way to the square. Once I'm on the hanging platform, I'll rip my overcoat off, put on a hat, and shout my opinion through a megaphone. I couldn't tell my parents about it, though, as they just stopped me. It was something I had to do alone. It was 11:45 a.m. when I entered the square. I was going to rebel at noon exactly, and nothing was going to stop me. I was doing this not only for myself, but my grandparents and the world as well. The square was busier than usual, with many people talking to one another or buying whatever fruit and vegetables they could. This was the perfect day for the beginning of my revolution. I nervously waited until 11:55 to make my way to the hanging platform. Once it was time, I stood up and walked towards it. Images of the old world flashed in my head, reminding me what I was about to fight for. I saw my grandparents sitting on the park bench watching a mother bird feed her young. I saw children playing in a grassy field, having the time of their lives. I then saw my mother and father standing in front of a statue. It was a statue of me, with a plaque under it saying, "In honor of the world's greatest revolutionary." Once I was on the platform, I took a deep breath as my grandparents' words repeated once again in my head. "You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you." I ripped off my bland gray overcoat to show off my yellow shirt and white pants. I put on my red top hat and pulled out my megaphone from my backpack, turned it on and began to speak into it. "Everyone, listen up!" People in the square fell silent and began to turn in my direction, looking confused. "There's more to life than the simple and bland lifestyle. We can have our own unique talents and preferences if we try. It's easy to do, I assure you." A police car pulled into the square and two officers just stepped out. They stared at me and began to walk in my direction, looking angrier than ever. I knew that I had to talk fast. "Please, listen to me. Rebel against the doctor and claim your independence." One of the officers swatted the megaphone from my hand and stepped on it, shattering it into pieces. He then grabbed my arms and pinned them against my back. I tried in vain to release myself, but his grip was too strong. The other officer clenched his right hand into a fist and struck me across the face. I fell to the ground with a thud and I began to fall unconscious. The last thing I remember hearing were the words my grandparents always told me when I would go back upstairs in my head. "You're destined to do great things. What they are is up to you." Now, this is the conclusion, and it goes as following. I was sitting alone in the restaurant in the square. I ordered the traditional breakfast and began to eat it eagerly once it arrived. I took a bite out of the meat, spat it out without hesitation. It tasted disgusting. I began to wipe my mouth when I saw a young man wearing a yellow shirt, white pants, and a red top hat enter the restaurant. I recognized him. He was the same boy who rebelled against the doctor last week. He looked at me and gave me a big grin. He began to walk towards me with the same sickening smile on his face. I gave him a slight smile, but frowned a split second later, hoping he would stay away from me. He stood next to my table, staring at me. I looked up at him and decided to start a conversation. "May I help you, son?" I asked him. "I am Sam. Sam I am. Do you like green eggs and ham?" Well, if you didn't get that, the second narrator, which was another person by the way, ended up coming across Sam I Am, a character in a popular Dr. Seuss book. Holy shit, I didn't really expect that. Now, as far as mindfucks go, I really have to put this up with Zorax. Let me tell you what. It's the second mindfuck that I really read that I couldn't guess partway into it. And although that's affected a lot by personal experiences, a lot of people got Zorax in like halfway through, so it's a lot personal, Mindfucks depend on the person's, personal experiences. I think we can all agree, though, this is definitely a good mindfuck. Just looking at the comments on the wiki page alone, people think of video games as they read, because they think of, the doctors, Dr. Robotnik from Sonic. I kind of thought of, Assassin's Creed 2 for a second because of the tyranny and hangings, but in the end, that one phrase made it click, made it just meld together and brought it all. Maybe I can't draw conclusions from a Dr. Seuss book, but, you know, the art styles for them have always really resembled an acid trip in my eyes. So maybe, you know, we're looking through the eyes of our protagonist who seems to be in a blissful world. It seems corrupted by green eggs and ham, or maybe that trip to the doctor. The world for this creepypasta was staged beautifully, and I was intrigued, and I still am. Especially, you know, during that restaurant section to see what kind of horror could ensue. It didn't overstay its welcome, you know, it kept its tone throughout, it built up brilliantly. Granted, it was more tense than creepy in my eyes, but it kicks you into childhood and leaves you with some unpleasant imagery at the time, which in a sense contributes to eeriness and, you know, gives a general sense of dread as you try to understand the world around you. And you still do, because you still want to know more about the Doctor, and you want to know more and more and more. I mean, this is setting itself up for a sequel, and I really want to see a sequel to it. But, you know, in the end, I think this is quite good. I really liked the twist, you know, it was a good mindfuck. And the build-up was nice, it didn't overstay its welcome, perfect length. And yeah, that's really what I think about it. So this has been November 2013's Creepypasta of the Month, so tell me what you rate it and what would you change in the comments below. This Creepypasta has been requested by you all with the power of internet democracy. This has been another episode of Creepypastas, and if you liked what you saw, then like, comment, and subscribe. By the way, if you're wondering what game I'm playing on the screen, this is Left 4 Dead 2 for the PC. I picked it up on Steam a while back. It's actually available cheap on Steam. I think they even had a free giveaway for the game too. But yeah, basically, it's a zombie game. I really like it. This is workshop content you're seeing on the screen right here, like mods with the gun and everything. But yeah, if you're ever wondering what game I'm playing on the screen, I'll always key it in the beginning of the video. I'll put it in the description. Sometimes I'll mention it in the end, but yeah, this is Left 4 Dead 2. Fun game. You should check it out if you can. This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.